Okay, welcome to the Troy Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 22nd. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Ehrlich? Here. Mr. Westmeyer?
Here.
Mr. McGarry?
Here.
Mr. Titterington?
Here.
Mr. Cappers?
Here.
Mr. Wolke?
Here.
Mr. Lutz?
Here.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Lutz as the acting mayor, taking Mayor Otis on the Planning Commission today. Minutes of June 8th have been disseminated to Planning Commission members prior to this meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions of those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I so move.
Is there support?
Second.
Mr. McGarry? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the first matter on the agenda, the Historic District application for 101 Public Square Northwest. Staff have a report.
Yes, sir. So this is a request by applicant Kyle Baker with Baker's Locksmith for the Planning Commission to consider the review of paint colors and a building sign at the property located at 101 Public Square Northwest. The building will be gray, functional gray SW7024. The window and door trim will be a white, which is pure white. And the front entry doors and window sills will be painted black, which is peppercorn. The new colors will complement agave and rye. Additionally, the applicant is requesting a 24.8 square feet building sign in the shape of a key. The sign will be made of PVC and will be stud mounted. The applicant will also be requesting to add gooseneck lighting at a later meeting. The existing sign cabinet will be removed, so we're pretty excited about that. Staff recommends approval of the paint scheme and sign based on the following. The colors will complement neighboring properties. The colors do not cover any contributing features. The sign colors will complement the building, and the colors and sign do not detract from the historic integrity of the streetscape. That will conclude my report.
Any questions of staff? Commission want to take any action?
Move for approval.
There's a motion. Second. Support.
I'll second.
Mr. Westmeyer. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Application is approved.
Next on the agenda is a rezoning of the Sheridan annexation. Staff have a report.
Yes, sir. So this is 1525 Troy Sydney Road, in line 11513. This was a part of the Sheridan annexation that was approved under Ordinance 05-2022. It's currently zoned county zoning of R1 AAA, which is one family residential. Staff is requesting that the zoning district for this parcel be rezoned to the R4 single family residential district. The zoning code describes the R4 district as designed to accommodate single family dwellings on lots with areas of at least 9,000 square feet. This lot would meet that requirement. The comprehensive plan for future land use map identifies this property as future residential. Due to the straightforward nature of this request, the compliance with the City of Troy comprehensive plan, and the fact that City Council is required to hold a public hearing if this request proceeds on, staff does not recommend a public hearing. Staff is recommending that Planning Commission provide a positive recommendation of the proposed zoning change from county zoning of R1 AAA, one family, to city zoning of R4 single family residential based on the following. The property is currently being utilized as residential use. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the intent and purposes of the zoning code. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the surrounding zoning districts, and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Any questions for staff?
I'll move that we not hold a public hearing.
Second.
There's motion and support. Any further discussion? Please keep in mind that an affirmative vote means we will not be having a public hearing. Please call the roll.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Planning Commission will not hold a public hearing.
Next, we go to the recommendation of City Council.
I'll make a motion to make a positive recommendation to the Troy City Council.
I'll second.
So support. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Next on the agenda is the right-of-way dedication of part of Barnhart and Fenner Road. Staff have a report.
Yes, sir. So this is located on the northwest corner of the intersection at West Market Street and Barnhart Road. The right-of-way to be dedicated is 1.021 acres of in-lot 10853. This replat is considered a minor subdivision and does not require planning commission or city council approval. The replat will encompass 2 parcels in the creation of the proposed right-of-way known as Momentum Center. The replat of the 2 lots for development led to this request of additional right-of-way. This replat has been reviewed by the city engineer, and staff is requesting that planning commission make a recommendation to city council to dedicate the 1.021 acres of in-lot 10853 as right-of-way, with the condition that the escrow agreement is approved prior to going to city council.
Any questions of staff? Now, I can't read this real well, even with my bifocals on. The dedication is the cul-de-sac, basically, a little bit on Fenner Road, Barnhart Road.
Correct.
Is that right? Commission want to take any action? And this would be a recommendation of Troy City Council on the dedication upon the conditions stated by staff.
I will make a motion for a positive recommendation to council.
On the conditions of staff?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, there's a motion. Is there support for that motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Westmeyer. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Gabbers?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfman?
Yes.
Mr. Letts?
Yes.
Mrs. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mr. Tittinger?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Okay, next we have the proposed amendments to the zoning code concerning historic preservation overlay district. Staff, did you make the changes that were mentioned at the last?
We did make those changes.
I want to point out another one.
Okay.
On page 15, if you take a look at that, item number 6, determining the significance of a structure. It appears to have a hyphen in front of it. I don't think the hyphen's necessary. Okay. I'm going to submit to everybody a copy presented to us by Mr. Ben Southerly prior to the meeting, dealing with some matters that I'm sure he's going to make a presentation on today. And all the planning commission members have received a copy of this by email late last night, I believe. So,
I think it might be a little different, you said.
oh, so it might be a little different. Well, we'll have to inquire of Mr. Southerly as to how it's going to be different, but that will be forthcoming. Okay, this is.
Did you turn the microphone off? This thing, I can't hear a thing.
All right. Okay, we're going to be talking about the public hearing of the zoning code concerning the historic preservation overlay district. Now, as far as the direction of the hearing today, anybody who wants to talk can come up and talk. You're going to be granted 3 minutes for doing so. At the end of the 3 minutes, we'll ask you to state your, have a seat. When you come up and come to the podium, we'll ask you to give your name and address, and then you can begin your presentation, and the 3 minutes will start at that point in time. We ask that none of the speakers reiterate points that were already made by prior speakers, and it would also be most helpful, since today we are considering the amendment to the zoning code, if in your presentation you could cite that portion of the amended or proposed amendments for which you're speaking. Okay, that'd be most helpful to us. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and begin the public hearing. First speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Ben Southerly, 5474 East State Route 41, Troy. I serve as president of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, a nonprofit that advocates for the preservation, restoration, and repurposing of Troy's historic places. And I also serve as president of the board of the Overfield Tavern Museum. In November 2021, Troy City Council passed a moratorium on demolitions in downtown Troy. The council wanted to give city staff time to research ordinances of Ohio communities with historic downtowns, citing a need for greater objectivity and a need to modernize the language in the city's zoning code. In April, Mr. Titterington updated council on this work, stating that city staff were looking at best practices and were working through Heritage Ohio. You have before you a draft of that work. We would like to commend city staff for the research to make the zoning code more objective when it comes to the standards in place for demolitions in our beautiful and historic downtown. We think some progress has been made on that front. Downtown Troy owes its beauty to the stewardship of many generations of property owners. Maintaining a downtown like ours is a delicate balance, one that can only be achieved when many stakeholders work together. Changing the built environment in our historic downtown is not the only duty of sitting on the Troy Planning Commission, but it is among your most consequential and important duties. As you are aware, THPA collaborated with Troy Main Street and Troy Community Works to do their own survey of Ohio communities and to discuss best practices that could be implemented in our downtown. We met several times from January through April. We built consensus around a range of incentives, educational initiatives, and common sense regulatory reforms to strengthen this culture of stewardship. We developed a document that was endorsed by the boards of all 3 nonprofit organizations, as well as by the boards of the Troy Historical Society and the Overfield Tavern Museum. City staff did a fine job of surveying other communities about how they handle these matters. I don't know if the city staff shared their survey document with you, but I asked Sue Knight to forward it in a Cliff Notes version to you. If you look at that survey, you will see that when cities make significant changes to their downtown, people with professional backgrounds in architecture or history are almost always involved. Troy is an outlier in this respect. Yet city staff has declined to recommend to you that the best practice that our planning commission evolve to adequately reflect our downtown stakeholders. Why is that? Specifically, our organizations asked the city to add 2 seats to the 7-member planning commission. 1 seat would be held by an architect or professional engineer. The other will be held by a nonprofit group whose mission relates to historic preservation. In downtown Troy, there are 3 such nonprofits: Troy Main Street, Troy Community Works, and the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. Troy wasn't always an outlier when it comes to this best practice in historic preservation. I'd like to turn the floor over to Lorraine Wyatt to explain further. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Lorraine Wyatt. I live at 118 South Walnut Street here in Troy, and I serve as the treasurer of THPA, Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. I'm here to talk about the Board of Architectural Review. The BAR, if anybody remembers, it grew out of a concern of individuals back in the 1960s. And they were concerned about what was happening about Troy and its older buildings. And of course, everybody knows that there's a lot of homes in Troy that are older. The bar continued till about 1990 when, and its intent was to prevent the loss of historical significant building as well as character-defining features of those buildings. The intent was to help people add value to their properties. The bar disbanded in early 2000s. Some people say it was because of lack of interest, while others say it was the city's disregard of its council. However, it is worth noting that the makeup of the bar had 5 members. It had an architect, and we currently don't have an architect on this board. It had a representative from the city's beautification committee. I don't believe there's anybody represented on the planning commission now that is on that committee. It had a resident of the historic district. There are no residents of historic district on the planning commission now. It had a representative of a downtown business, and again, there are no representatives of downtown businesses on the planning commission. It had a member who represented the Troy Historical Society, but no historical organization in Troy is represented on the Planning Commission now. THP and other nonprofit organizations did not request for the city to reinstate the Board of Architecture Review, but we are asking that the Planning Commission evolve. and be more inclusive of the downtown stakeholders. Within the framework of the Planning Commission, we are proposing a change that just makes common sense. The city's own survey of Ohio communities found that their boards have as many as 11 members. While 7 might be more common, 9 is certainly not unworkable. In their June 8th staff report, the city staff said that the current size of the Planning Commission continues to serve the city well, but when you say the city, who exactly do you mean? Do you mean the City Hall? Certainly, the best interests of the downtown community at large are not adequately represented. And the current system has not been working well. We have seen the consequences of that, and they are still playing out in court. Updating the zoning code is a big part of the puzzle, and there's no doubt about it, but making sure that the Planning Commission reflects the community is just as important.
Thank you.
If not, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Good afternoon. I'm Martin Stewart, 1486 Cheshire Road, Troy. I serve as a member of the Troy Historical Preservation Alliance. I'm a trustee of the Troy Historical Society, also a volunteer at the Troy History Room. It is worth noting that in 2014, the city's growing population triggered an increase in number of city council members from 7 to 9. So Troy has navigated this before. We were told by city leadership that going from 7 to 9 planning commissions would be unwieldy. When we asked for an explanation, we were told that the roll call and meetings would take too long. I just timed the last roll call of the people that are here. It was 12 seconds. The city leadership told us in an email it seemed a little obvious that the additional 2 planning commission seats could be for the purpose of stacking the deck. Well, let's take a step back. This doesn't have to turn into another us versus them scenario. We've had too much of that lately. You've been there, I've been there. City leaders have said that contrary to public opinion, the city is not against historic preservation. So we're going to take the city at its word. We're asking the city to look at what its own survey shows and then to put those best practices in place by adding 2 seats to the Planning Commission so that downtown stakeholder interests are better represented. And that's all we're asking for here. One other thing, the city staff has expressed interest in having the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance update the nearly 50-year-old Ohio Historic Inventory Forms on file for buildings in downtown Troy. This would be very helpful to your work on the Planning Commission. We offered to update those forms as part of our package of proposals, and we're very happy to help. But we can't have the city holding out one hand for help while the other hand is giving us the stiff arm. That's not what good partnership looks like. Troy is a great community. Let's go for the win-win here by adopting this common sense proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it not one of the staff's efforts to update our historic forms, our historic building forms? I thought I heard that.
That's one of the goals we have set for future, and it was offered in the memo that was sent from the THBA.
Gotcha, thank you. Any other speakers? Sir, come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Tweed. I recently inherited a farm east of here. It's half Lost Creek Township, half Elizabeth Township. That's 3070 East 55 is the address. There's a large barn on that property. It might be about as old as this Oddfellows Hall courthouse building. I don't know. But it's all hand-cut timbers using trees you can't find anymore. They're so big. And just about 2 months ago, I suffered some serious wind damage to this building. It blew off one barn door completely. I think it's 14 feet tall, 12 feet wide, and destroyed the other one in the middle of the night. It was probably a tornado, don't know. Thing is, the insurance company said they would cover it for $3,700. I'll pay my $1,000 deductible. I'll pay a couple thousand more just to make it look better. My point is, it's already been done. The same contractor that repaired the top of the Caroline restaurant here quickly jumped on the damage from the wind, repaired it. I'll be happy to pay a couple $1,000 out of pocket to get the job done. Why? Because I'm Elizabeth Township Historical Society member. I appreciate the building. I want to keep it for posterity. I don't have some accountant whispering in my ear, oh, it's obsolete. Knock it down and replace it with something, a modern pole barn. That may be perfect sense if you're an accountant and you have buddies in the construction business. However, the Elizabeth Township Historical Society folks like the barn as is. Not that many people have even seen it. It's a half-mile off the road. But if you could even find the skilled help to build it these days, you could not find the materials. That's exactly why I want to keep it. I'm going to spend my own money out of my own pocket to keep it. My main question is, what's wrong with the owner of this building? Why won't he do the same thing for his own community? I've been asking that question ever since this thing got started. I never have heard an answer. If you all have an answer to that, I would much appreciate hearing it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Speakers now and in the future, if you address the proposed amendment to the zoning code that this public hearing is supposed to be about, please. Next speaker, if they want to come forward.
Good afternoon, Bradley Barron, 105 Crestwood Drive. I'm going to try to take as near as 3 minutes as I can. I may go over a little bit, so please don't shout me down at the end of the 3 minutes, Mr. Cappers. I appreciate it.
You're entitled to 3 minutes.
Well, I would like to take a little longer than that, if I may, because what I have to say may take a little longer. I think this 3 minute thing is just attempt to gag this through, like I said at a previous hearing. I have some questions which I'd like to ask the members. Mr. Wolke, I'll start with you. What's your background in historic preservation?
Maintain your comments to the...
I am asking the question, Mr. Cappers, so please...
We're not required to answer any questions from the public.
Oh, you are having this hearing, so please let me ask my question, sir. I'm asking questions because it pertains to the proposal that was suggested. So I would like to be able to answer them. Thank you.
With your comments.
Thank you. The point I was trying to get at to ask the question is to establish that there is nobody on this commission that has any background in historic preservation. It's a simple thing I was trying to establish, if you would have let me. But here again, we have an instance where we want to ramrod stuff through this commission without public hearing, or gagged public hearing at best. So what I'm asking you, I am in support of the proposal that has been made by the 3 members that spoke before me to add 2, if not more, members to the Planning Commission that have a vested interest in historic preservation. And there's another thing I want to talk about, and I don't know the section right offhand because I don't have access to the internet with my phone, unfortunately, but there was a section that talked about the appropriateness or the certificate of appropriateness, the criterion for issuing thereof. And it says that there was a section A that had to be followed, and then it said you had to pick 2 there was like 4 or 5 other sections that followed that we had to pick at least, you had to hold up the standards of at least 2. Now we got to this point because the last group of standards we have were seriously cherry-picked. Mr. Kimmel knew that he could not meet 2 of the 4, so he picked the 2 that he knew he could meet by whatever means necessary. Now what I'm in favor of is an all or none. Either you meet them all or you don't get the certificate, period. But yet here we are saying we can meet 1 and 2 more. Why don't we meet all of them? Why are we not making these people that want to demolish a historic building meet all the standards instead of just 2 or 3? That's all I've got.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Meinzinger. Been working in Troy for 25 years, own a land development company, Troy Land Development, and for the last 5 years, I've been partners in a downtown business, Pop-Up Events, which is right on the square. I'm not a member of THPA, but I support their proposal to you to add 2 additional members, or at the very least, representation to this board of an architect or someone with building and construction background, in addition to having representation from a downtown nonprofit. And I can tell you that that would go a long way for downtown businesses to feel that there was transparency, accountability, and representation for those of us that invest downtown and work downtown and deal with all of the things that are the good, the bad, and the challenging of being a downtown business owner. So I would certainly support their proposal to you. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, Jessica?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood what you had said.
Yes.
Okay.
You go right ahead.
Thank you. So you're in support of either, maybe or both, but either you mentioned increasing the number of members or at a minimum strengthening the qualifications moving forward for membership on the Planning Commission. Is that what I took from your comments?
I mean, I think in all practicality at this point, you don't want to boot people off, but so I can certainly see adding 2 additional members that would have those qualifications. I don't think that would be cumbersome for you. I think it could be really enlightening for you, and I do think it goes a long way to creating, like I said, that sense of transparency and accountability and representation for those of us that live. My business partner in Pop-Up, Karen, lives in downtown Troy. So it just goes a long way to provide that representation for those who live, work, and invest in downtown Troy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Planning Commission, if anybody has any questions, many of the speakers, after their presentation, feel free to chime in. Next speaker. Any other speakers? Do we have any questions from the Commission of anyone that's spoken so far? Mr. Southerly, would you come up? I've got a couple questions if you don't mind answering. First of all, we had received a packet that you forwarded last night, but you said today it changed in some fashion. Would you outline the change?
Sure, I'd be glad to clarify. So I wanted to ensure everybody had the second and third pages are what she received previously, no changes made to them. I did also include the language from the Ohio Revised Code. I just wanted to ensure everybody had that background, that what we're proposing is totally okay under the Ohio Revised Code. So I just wanted the Planning Commission to have that context.
Okay, follow your logic along with me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're quoting Ohio Revised Code 713.01.
Right.
Okay, and I think you highlighted the legislation, the language here that says legislative authority made by resolution change the number of citizen members, et cetera. Okay.
Correct.
That number of Planning Commission members doesn't appear anywhere in the proposed amendment to the zoning. It's a legislative matter. It's right in the revised code. It has to be brought up before council.
So, and of course, this entire matter will go before the council. However, the city's survey looked not only at changes to the actual zoning code, but it also looked at the makeup of the body that decides changes to the downtown. And so we felt it's appropriate that that comes before, that we bring our suggested changes to this body before you make a recommendation to the planning or to the city council.
Well, what's before us today is a recommendation concerning the proposed amendment, which doesn't contain anything concerning the number of planning commission members. You hear what I'm saying?
I do, but I mean, I guess the question will be, why did city survey include that in their survey? This is part of what's going on during the moratorium, and once the moratorium is over with, you know, the opportunity to make changes will probably sunset.
Okay.
Can I ask you a clarifying question? And I'm not trying to paraphrase you, Mr. Coppins, but it seems like what you're trying to say is that any recommendation any legislation to change the size of the planning commission would not come from this body, nor would it be recommended by this body, but it's purely an action for council to take by resolution, not through the amendment of the zoning ordinance.
Correct. That part's correct. I mean, certainly planning commissions, the park board, anybody can recommend to council that action be taken. They'd be knocking on your door as president of council
Correct.
to assign that to a committee.
Correct.
But it's not before us today is for an amendment to the zoning code on the historic preservation overlay district. So no matter what action, if we take action today to approve it or action to deny it, that portion of it doesn't come into play in our decision. It's council that makes that decision, not us. So if you want to go ahead and bark up somebody's tree, so to speak, it would be the city council members and to get that on their agenda for discussion purposes, I would think.
Well, as part of your recommendation, you folks have obviously been the ones in the trenches, and, the city did a survey of communities, and part of the survey that they did was not just to look at changing the zoning code, but also looking at the makeup of the bodies that make the decisions. I think they would probably be interested in your input, so.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Van Zelden? Thank you, sir. We have another speaker. You want to come up and identify yourself, sir? Name and address.
Yes. My name is Jeff Schilling, and I live at 591 Chartwell Court here in Troy. And I have a question, maybe to you, Mr. Cappers, would it be appropriate for the Troy Planning Commission to make a suggestion, not a recommendation, a suggestion to the council saying, hey, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an engineer or somebody interested in historical preservation on our board? I mean, in other words, you're absolutely right. What we're talking about today doesn't have to do with the membership of Troy Planning Commission, but at some point in time, Troy Planning Commission could say, hey, look, we need some help. It would be nice to have somebody with an engineer's background or a architectural background, especially when we get involved in the historical district, to help us understand what's going on and maybe help us clarify our decisions. And that you can make a suggestion to City Council to take a look at this. If you, as a board, thinks that this might be beneficial, to the activities that you guys carry on. That's basically that'd be my question, or at least something to consider anyway.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Any other public comments? Okay, we'll now close this session of public hearing. Next is a recommendation to City Council on this matter.
Well, I've got a couple questions regarding the overlay district text. One of which, it calls for the Planning Commission to adopt a overlay design manual. Are you anticipating staff providing the assistance with that, or hiring a consultant to assist with that?
Staff is partnered with Troy Main Street to draft the design manual. We are in the finishing touches of that, and it'll come before you.
Okay. And I wonder if we have an inconsistency here. On 113707B, which is on page 1, it limits the people who can appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals essentially to the applicant and immediate neighbors, whereas on page 23 it says any person aggrieved can file an application for appeal. Is that an inconsistency, or am I missing something?
Page
20, yeah, page 23, letter R.
Are you looking at the?
I'm looking at the one that came 2 weeks ago. I hope it's the same number.
It's different.
It is different.
Oh, it is different.
It is different now. I can give you my copy to look at really quick.
Well,
So to answer your question, the revised draft does clarify who can make the appeal, essentially the property owner or adjacent property owner. This is consistent with the variance procedures and other sections of the zoning code, and it helps clarify who's making the appeal. That's the reason for the request.
So you're saying that what came out for this meeting is different than the one that came out at the last meeting?
That's correct. We made some minor changes to the details per Mr. Pepper's comments.
So what was clarified, Austin? Page 23?
We actually had on page 23, the appeal section, the appeal of planning commission's decision that was in the current ordinance has been removed. Instead, we decided to revise the overall appeals for the zoning code that would include the appeal of the planning commission's decision.
Okay, I guess I assumed that the one came out last, or the previous meeting was the same as this time, but I guess not. Okay. I guess I'll have to reread again. In that Mayor Oda is not here, and she's the person whose family had a business in the downtown for many years, and plus she's the appointing authority for members of the Planning Commission. I think it would be useful to have her input before we take any further action. So I would move that we delay any vote on this until our next meeting.
Is that a motion to table?
Yes. Well, a motion to table is non-debatable, so I'm putting this in terms of I'm making a motion to move the vote to the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Is there support for the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Westmeyer.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Most certainly.
Given the fact that the moratorium, I believe, expires on or about July 14th, I believe was the date I read, what would a 2-week delay
That next meeting's on the 13th, isn't it? July?
Correct. What would that do to the moratorium? Would there be a period?
A 2-week delay, depending on what the finality of the action was, that going to the council and the council going through the 3 readings, the public hearing, and the committee process was going to put it beyond the
July 14th.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other discussion concerning the motion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. McGarry?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Okay, next we have other matters. And I understand from staff that we had one other matter that wants to bring before us today.
Yes, sir. So this is the property at 111 West Water Street. This is for the Planning Commission to consider the review of paint colors. The property is located in the B3 Central Business District. It's important to note that the Planning Commission previously approved a similar paint scheme with gray primary colors and black accent colors back in 2015. The building will be primarily white. The window and door trim will be black. And the front entry doors, windowsills, and awning will also be painted a different version of black. Staff recommends approval of the proposed paint scheme based on the following. The colors will complement neighboring properties in the building. The colors do not cover any contributing features, and the colors will not detract from the historic integrity of the streetscape.
Any questions to staff?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Titterington?
So, Austin, you're talking about the colors of the paint. On the set of renderings that we received, it also includes some, what amounts to new signage that I think is intended to be the building sign, kind of like you see, what is it, Heron's, the vault, is that what it's called, the vault?
Like a building identification?
Yeah, we've got a couple other buildings. Is that part of this recommendation, or is that separate? Because that has a color scheme to it. And so are you wanting the Planning Commission to clarify that we're talking about the brewery 1831 to be the building sign and not any final signage? Because I don't know that anybody knows.
That is not a part of this application. This was strictly for paint colors. That is just on the rendering itself. So no action needs to be taken on that sign. It would just be for the paint colors as described by staff.
Just on the exterior walls of the building and the trim itself?
That's correct.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for asking that.
Okay, any further discussion? Anybody want to take any action?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and support for the motion. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mrs. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Westmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Gary?
Yes.
Mr. Titterington?
Yes.
Mr. Cappers?
Yes.
Mr. Wolke?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Staff have anything else to come before the commission today?
We do not, thank you.
Commission members have anything else that you want to discuss?
Move to adjourn?
Is there support?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much for your attendance.